Organic is stopping chemical fertilizers and synthetic fertilizers, and it's stopping the harm that these chemicals and synthetics cause, right? So if I'm going to farm organically, you're stopping all these chemicals that used to be used on the farm, right? But it doesn't necessarily provide any type of cure. So that's like in the movie Super Size Me, right? You eat McDonald's for 30 days, your health system goes haywire, right? He looks like he's been smoking 4 packs of cigarettes for 20 years, you know, right? So you eat McDonald's for 30 days like the movie, and then you just stop, and you go organic, right? Well, you stopped the harm, but that wasn't enough. If you remember the movie, like his wife is some special vegan chef, and so now you got to start healing. So one of the easiest ways I explain is organic stops the harm that a lot of chemicals and synthetics cause. Biodynamic seeks to take it one step further, to not only stop the harm that causes, but add something that can kind of try to heal and rejuvenate it and bring it back to where it was. And so this is where we can move from the hard science of what you see under a microscope to more of this guesswork. But you see it in a lot of farms and vineyards that will transition to a biodynamic vineyard, is year 1, 2, and 3, they might not notice significant differences between organic and biodynamic, right? But year 4, things inevitably just take off and completely change. And so not enough money gets thrown at really researching scientifically and studying this. There's a lot of ideas, but one of the ideas that's been fairly proven with it is this idea of systemic acquired resistance. And simply put, that means that if this compost has these healing type of properties, its goal is when it goes into the soil, it's like, I want to make this soil better. I want to heal this soil. And when you add something to your soil, most of the problems in the soil are typically in the subsoil. So the compost is like working its way into the subsoil. I have to bring this subsoil back into balance. But by several years of doing that, once your subsoil is healthy and in balance, all that energy and all that healing power that's in there, all that living energy, doesn't have to head south. The soil's good, so where's it going? It's heading straight up north. And that's why all of a sudden they'll notice, it might take several years, but suddenly things completely change. And it might not always be like a massively increased yield, but it's all the other characteristics. It's the fact that maybe organic and biodynamic, all things being equal, might produce the same amount, but when things aren't equal, when there's a drought, when there's any kind of severe weather phenomenon, any kind of pest or disease outbreak, any kind of anything like that, it's the overall resilience of the plant. And that's just the idea of being healthy. It's the same reason science shows us now that, you know, kids who grew up on a farm are less likely to get sick when they get older. Why? Because they just ran around and played in dirt, right? You just played in dirt, it just builds up your immune system, you know? And now I look at these moms, you know, and every automatic door, there's usually something, a Purell next to it, you know, whether it's the supermarket or anywhere, and they're wiping their kids and this, that, and the other. By the time he's 20, he's going to coming down with every kind of disease under the sun. He's got no immune system. He's got no natural resistance. He's not just, you know, he's not eating healthy. He's not outside playing in the dirt. You know, good luck with that one, you know. So that's one of the, you know, kind of the other ideas. So the compost itself, that energy, that life, it's really balancing and bringing into health and everything else, and then really also adding to the uniqueness of that plant or of that soil. One of the things about, again, why I refer to wine, is one of the most sought after characteristics in the wine industry is terroir. Okay? When they talk about the terroir of the wine, terroir comes from the Latin word terra for earth, but it's referring to the sense of place. That if I drink this wine, there's a specific characteristic of that wine that's indicative of that specific type of soil where that grape was grown. And if this whole greenhouse is a row of vineyards, right? The grapes that are coming off the vines right here could have a completely different taste characteristic and profile than the grapes that are grown over there. So that can produce different soil type can produce different types of wines and different flavor profiles, so the terroir reflects that. So with biodynamic composting and biodynamic agriculture, it's really seeking to enhance the uniqueness of every plant and every soil profile rather than trying to make everything the same. So you end up with completely different flavor profiles. So it's not, again, it's not always about the yield, but it's about the overall health and the vitality and some of these other characteristics, you know, that show up in the plant. So how to use compost? Well, it's very simple. Mix it in 1 to 3. If you're doing something else, you got to go out and buy something. Top dress it in, heal your dirt, work with your soil. You can top dress, you can scratch it in, you can put it around your edibles in the morning and make a salad that evening. Just super versatile, it's just a lifeblood of everything. We do have potting soil, and what's unique about our potting soil is when we came out with our potting soil, we worked backwards. And our idea was to make the best compost in the world. And when we decided to make a potting soil, we didn't take the approach of, well, what do we get for cheap? And then let's build around that. I know I can get this cheap, and this cheap, so let me build around that.
Hey, you can stand here for a second?
What's the best of everything? We can get the best specific ingredient of every single one and put it together. So we didn't look at cost until we had the final recipe. And then we figured out, okay, how much does everything cost? Okay, this is the price. But we looked at what was going into it, and everything was justified. And I wouldn't change a single thing because I don't see what I could change about that to lower the cost. We do not use blood meal or bone meal or feather. The 3 most common fertilizer ingredients because they're the most cheap, because they're the most readily available, because they come from every massive factory slaughterhouse. So if I'm trying to buy my manure from organic farms and support the organic farmers and not the factory farms, I don't want to buy blood meal from the same slaughterhouse as those factory farmers. Now I'm kind of economically contributing to the same model that I'm ethically opposed to, if that makes sense. So we sub in fish meal and fish bone meal and crab meal and shrimp meal and lean meal and make sure we get absolutely every type of input that the plants need, at least for the first 4 to 6 weeks. But I want to just really quickly then jump and talk about compost. So, how many people here have used compost teas? Okay, so same way that compost feeds the soil, and I like to say compost works like a probiotic for the soil, tea can work like a probiotic for the plant. And so all you're doing is you're taking the compost and putting it in a liquid form. And the way we package it is just in 4 tea bags. Okay? Now, the reason that this is dry and that's wet
hit the restroom real fast.
Is that if I take this compost right here and I put it in this cotton bag, what do you think is going to happen? Huh? Maybe. It's just going to eat it up. I've got billions of living organisms here that have finished composting, so they don't really have any more organic matter. So they're just kind of hanging out. And then I just gave them food. I'm like, hey, here's some organic food. They're just going to chomp it down. It was a packaging nightmare when we first started this product. I'll tell you a quick little story. The first one I found was like compost tea bags. I said, I want this to look just like tea. I researched all over the place, and I found these like wood and hemp fiber tea bags out of Germany. And they're designed to stuff like loose leaf tea in, so if you grow your own chamomile, you know, you dry it, and you make your own tea. And you can iron them shut, and it's this wood and hemp fiber, and it's these jumbo tea bags, and it looked just like a tea bag. Genius, right? Filled them up, ironed them, put them together. I was like, sell them, you know? Off we went to sell them. 3 weeks go by, 4 weeks go by, so I finally get a call from the customer. She said, I bought your compost tea, and I noticed on the package that it said compost tea bags, but I don't think I received a bag. I was like, no, it's in bags. She's like, no, it's just a bag of compost, and I thought maybe there's a bag on top that I'm supposed to pour it into. I'm like, no. She's like, well, you forgot my bag. Okay, so I go run out, go to the warehouse, and look inside, and nothing's there. It was gone. There's not even remnants It just ate through everything. It was just a bag of compost. Recall, right? We only sold it like 3 stores at that point, so it wasn't too hard. So I'm like, okay, so I came out with the cotton thing, and I was like, this is really gonna be good. Same thing, filled them up, sealed them up, put them on the shelf. Same thing. Didn't eat the whole thing, but it put all these holes in it, so it looked like it got, you know, attacked by termites. Like the string might be left, and then some other things. So what we do is we dry it out. And the whole idea is you've got billions and billions of microorganisms, but every living organism needs what to survive? 3 things. Water, air, food, right? So air, water, and food. So they got some air, they got a little bit of moisture, but we dry it out so there's not any water.
What's that?
And make sure there's no food. So what happens, the microbes are like bears in the winter, they go dormant. Okay, so the microbes are dormant. So
The best he got was
we
SOB.
want to wake them up and put them in the garden. So first thing we want to do is just soak it in water. The idea is we're adding water back. We're waking them up, right? So it's like a bear in the cave in the springtime, right? You add water, and it's like a loud noise that woke them up. They're kind of groggy, right? You can aerate it and put an air stone in it, or
I do it.
you don't have to. Just wait till the next day, and then right before you use it, just stir it. Stir it one direction, stir it the other.
Yeah, those are cool.
The idea is now you're trying to add a little bit of air.
Yeah.
So when you add air, and you've already added water, right? It's like the bears in the winter coming out of their cave. They're wide awake, right? So they got their air, they got water. Now what do they want? Food. So you either have to feed them, which is where you see compost tea brewers that start adding all types of fungal foods and bacterial foods and this, that, and the other. Now you've kind of crossed into another threshold of compost tea brewing. Or you let them loose. So we always promote with our tea bags, soak it overnight, stir it up right before you use it, and then just immediately use it. But you got to go backwards. So don't put it in water today unless you're going to be in the garden tomorrow. And then don't stir it until right before you're going to use it. So you always kind of want to work backwards with that. And the idea is
You don't want to let it hang around in the...
But I inherently feel like if you're doing billions and billions of microorganisms in a brewer, by the time hours 18 to 24
I'd let it bubble for...
you have to start adding food.
I'd just let it bubble for the rest of the week. I'd use it for the rest of the week. And then I'd go back, make another one.
You might be giving a different advantage to different types of microbes. Some are able to eat it. So some
We
might,
root drench.
you know, some might die off and some might survive, but you probably won't have the same amount of diversity once you
I think I'd use it for foliar until like...
than you would if you just fire them up and let them
As long as...
It's such a great opportunity.
Crap, I don't know where that thing stopped. I gotta find the setting in there. I got a setting in there that keeps
out of your raised bed,
stopping the damn
whatever you
thing.
got from home composting back into your raised bed. I always recommend to people throw like a couple sheets of cardboard on top of it. You know, just organic matter, cardboard on top of it, wet it and soak it down, throw the dirt back on top. Okay, nature's gonna do its thing. That's just gonna kind of break down over the winter months. And it might be looking kind of like it's unusable if it's in your little, you know, pile in the backyard. But if you throw that stuff in the late fall and you come back, you know, March, April the following year, you've just got, it's just broken down. Added new organic matter, right? So you don't have to go out and continually find and amend every year, whether you're in containers or raised beds. You'll always need to add roughly at least 20-25% new organic matter. So you've taken care of that. So now all you're looking to do is continually to add the food where the compost comes in. This makes it, you know, just makes it super, super healthy. How many people here do home composting? Okay. All right. So we got some. Anybody have a lot of success, a lot of problems?
What do you think? Home compost soil?
Yeah, do your own compost.
Oh, no.
One quick thing I'll just say. A couple things about home composting. 3 variables: moisture, air, and carbon-nitrogen ratio. Okay. So carbon-nitrogen ratio. We'll start. You want roughly somewhere between 25 to 1 to 40 to 1 for your carbon-nitrogen ratio. Forget about the numbers if that sounds too analytical. Your home composting, you need some carbon and you need some nitrogen. So if you have grass clippings, you got some food scraps, you got some leaves, that's all highly nitrogenous material, but it has very, very little carbon in it. Okay, so a lot of times when people pile that stuff, they're like, my home compost, it's not really going. Well, it can't really break down and catch on fire because it needs the carbon and the nitrogen together. So that's where woody stuff comes in. You can tear up pieces of cardboard or newspaper that's got carbon. It packs together, which affects the airflow, which we'll come to next. If you have a small tumbler or a small pile, it's worth it to spend a couple bucks and go buy a bale of those shavings they sell for like hamsters and stuff, because that's just woody stuff. Or if the guys are, trimming the power lines somewhere and you see a pile of wood chips on the side of the road,
Green Lions, cannabis bedding.
Yeah,
see that?
Number one is get that
They got
ratio.
their cannabis bedding in top grass.
People gotta go and find a little bit of extra carbon material and add to their nitrogen.
No, they're weed stock. It's weed stock ground up.
Yeah, they're using it in their hemp concrete.
I wouldn't even it's already been treated and just wouldn't need it. That's something good if you want
My buddy built one of them hempcrete houses, man.
It's
Pretty sick, dude. It's out in Virginia or whatever. I visited somebody and helped him build a hempcrete house.
Okay. Leaves and
I thought it'd be cool. I don't know how it would work out here. It might not be so hot out here, but
if you don't have something
you'd have to
that's dry,
do it during a certain season, that's for
pile to
sure.
get too dry. You definitely don't want it to get too wet. Okay, so controlling the moisture and watching what happens with the pile, you definitely have to pay attention to. That's a lot of times what happens in those tumblers. A lot of nitrogenous material goes in there, and then it just turns into a soupy, gooey, gunky mess. Okay, and when you don't have too much moisture, you can't have airflow because it forces the air out, right? So that creates more right conditions for what they call going anaerobic, which means you can't breathe. Which is why if you pile a bunch of leaves up, you can come back 6 months later, but you can see a bunch of leaves in the middle never broke down. They might have some white around them, with mycetes started and eat away and everything, but the fungi, the bacteria can't get in, because the air can't get in, so it never fully breaks down. So that brings us to the third variable: carbon-nitrogen ratio, moisture, and the last one, air. Your pile's got to be able to breathe. What happens composting is a living process. It's microbes eating stuff. And the more they eat, the more they sweat. And they're sweating. That's what creates heat in a compost pile. So if I stick my hand in the pile, if I can't keep my hand in there, it's 120 degrees plus. Right? I got pretty good at taking temperatures, just by sticking your hand in the pile. So that's microbes. So best tactic for home composting pile is use larger branches. Not because the branches are going to break down with this beautifully crumbly compost, but because when you throw big branches in, it's going to create all these pockets of air. And when it's time to turn the compost, just pull the bigger branch out and, take the stuff and kind of flip it around, throw the branches back in, throw stuff on top. So you're adding little air pockets. And ideally you want more air pockets towards the bottom because things compact. And the way the compost pile naturally wants to work is if it can suck air in towards the bottom, the microbes are able to eat it, it's going to push heat off of the top. Right? So another tactic you can use if you wanted to get more sophisticated is the lazy man's method. It takes a little bit of work, but it's what they call passive static pile. And you can grab,
You're such a gentleman.
go to the, this if you've got a bigger yard and you generate more organic material, if you want to get excited about compost, like I am, get like a PVC pipe, like a round PVC pipe from a plumbing or drainage place that has all the holes already drilled into it, okay, and put that down. What you need though is air's got to be able to come through those holes without packing them up. So then you want to cover.
I was trying to find a second where you breathe it and stop and restart it.
Really rough, big chunks of wood. So like big
I know he doesn't
wood.
breathe.
And you put that down.
But he's
like
awesome.
Buffer, right?
Really informative.
Over the pile. So the air can go through it. Nothing's going to clog those holes. And you build your whole compost pile on top of that. So air is constantly getting sucked into the pile through the two ends of the PVC pipe. The microbes literally will pull air into the pile. So there's going to be natural airflow coming in, right? And it's going to be going up. And everybody's going to be chowing and going and breaking down. It's kind of like, it's just a good, easy technique for being able to do some home composting in your backyard.